what's sort of the approach there for you as far as explaining the space?
One of the biggest things, to start with when you're trying to generate some sort of buy-in or get someone on board with cybersecurity as a vision is to quantify it for them. Oftentimes, small, medium-sized businesses are running on a tight budget. And so it's not the first thing that comes to mind. Oftentimes we'll try to avoid it until, maybe it becomes a bigger problem and there's some sort of a serious issue. That starts to be a little bit too late, in the game.
Welcome into the Independent Thinking Podcast. This is your host, Rob Stott. October was National Cybersecurity Awareness Month here in the United States, and it's a topic that we've covered. We covered throughout the month in different forms and fashions in our newsletter and on the blog, and attended events in recent memory that were all about this topic. But it's also one that really can't be and shouldn't be condensed to just these 31 days on the calendar. And that's why today, after Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we intentionally scheduled a podcast with Mr. Bryan, our VP of Technology and IT here at Nationwide Marketing Group, a guy that has decades of experience in the IT world and the technology world that we can tap into and show, what he's doing, not only on behalf of Nationwide and our members, but what he's done in the past, in his past lives, and career stops to make cybersecurity something that is, at the forefront, not only for the companies, but within the minds of the individuals at those companies, and creating that buy-in, because this is something, a topic that can't be owned by just one department or one individual. It has to be something that is mindful, that everyone is mindful of at a company. And it takes just one slip up, one human error to, result in someone getting access to information that they shouldn't have access to. And we've seen it. There's examples of members that have suffered, from cyber attacks to just the big news stories out there that you see on a regular basis of companies being hacked, and doing what we can. And Bryan, of course, leading the charge there to make sure that not only our members, but nationwide as well, right? That people, here at Nationwide Marketing Group are mindful of, the cyber threats that exist out there. So a topic that, like I said, can't be condensed to just the month of October and needs to be talked about on a regular basis. And Bryan's doing that for us, and, a great asset to the Nationwide community as well, because he's doing it on behalf of the members. So looking forward to diving into this with him. So let's do it. This is Bryan Aller, our VP of Technology here at Nationwide Marketing Group, on the Independent Thinking Podcast. All right, we are back on the Independent Thinking Podcast, and I felt the need to dress appropriately when we're talking about cybersecurity. Now, I'm not in my mom's basement, but I am in an office that's in my house, and I have a hoodie on, NMG branded even, Mr. Aller, Mr. Bryan Aller, our VP of IT and Technology here at Nationwide Marketing Group. We're talking cybersecurity, man. How's it going?
It is going all right. I gotta get you one of those NMG hoodies.
Yeah, right. I know. It feels like if we're gonna be talking about this, I should have it up. I thought about drawing the shades a little bit. If you're watching the video, I don't know, really get in the mood to talk about cybersecurity, but I held back. I got into the role, but I held back a little bit here. But no, we appreciate you taking the time and diving into a topic that I know, we're just coming off of October, which is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. But we did this purposefully. We waited to talk about it until November because, truthfully, it's a conversation that needs to happen throughout the year, and I think you'd agree with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, for those listening, tell us about yourself, your background, and your path to NMG, and then we'll get into kind of your role here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been at NMG now since February of this year. I'm serving as the VP of IT and development. Prior to this, I was at Comcast as a director of software engineering. I was overseeing big data platforms that were used across the enterprise with, 10,000 plus users, which was pretty exciting. Spent almost 20 years at Comcast.
Wow.
And my background has spanned a variety of different departments. So I started in ops, and then I did some work with, building out tools and developing tools, and then managing people developing tools. And then when I saw the potential for what you could do with data collected in those tools, kind of took me on this path to building out platforms. initially platforms around data, and then later, managing the platforms themselves. And then, I guess the next logical step for me after having spent almost 20 years across, all of these different lines of business was to kind of take it to the next level up.
Yeah.
And, having worked in each of these functional areas, the opportunity to come work for NMG, is pretty exciting because I was able to, you know, look at a portfolio of applications, of data, of, exciting new technologies, and I could tinker with and be creative and drive innovation across, each of these different areas in which I had worked individually. This is kind of that culminating moment where I'm bringing it all together into one place.
Yeah. Well, I feel like the Philly guy in me has to make the joke, right? So Comcast is more than just TV and Xfinity, as people realize, right? So it's cool to be able to, for those in the area, and I know you're not anymore. You're out in Colorado, is that right? Denver, out that
Yeah,
way.
I moved to Colorado in
Okay.
2016 to
Yep.
build out a big data team here.
Yeah. So I mean, you can't get, if you're listening to this, you can't get mad at Bryan if you're not happy with your cable or anything like that. It's just well beyond that. He's also part of our team now. But truthfully, like it's exciting because we talk a lot about data here, right? And the possibilities of leveraging the data in a retailer's business. So to see sort of you're at the forefront of that, being able to play around with and, in your words, tinker with. So what's it about? And you can kind of tell already, sort of in how you answered that. What's it about this space that gets you excited about being able to do that? Whether it's the act of actually being able to, like, digging in deep, you're getting your hands dirty with the data, or even more broadly, more generically about the strategy around it, or is it all of it?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything, and I think in a lot of respects, it kind of ties back into a worldview and a set of life interests. So prior to getting into technology, and I'd been living in Philadelphia, and I had enrolled at Drexel University for my degree program, but I had a hard time trying to decide which way I wanted to go
Mm.
because I initially thought I was going to do biomedical engineering. I was going to be at the forefront of hardcore technology, and I could do that biology aspect that interested me, and I could go build some solutions and work in the medical field. But I didn't have certain prerequisites for school. And I knew that being in environmental science and working with the ecosystem outdoors was something I loved, but it wasn't going to pay well enough. Doing graphic design and digital media was something I was interested in, but I wasn't sure if I was good enough. And I found my way into information systems as a program. Seemed like a nice mix of all of those worlds. I could bring the linguistic piece in as programming languages, and I could
Hmm.
bring in that ecosystem mindset into systems thinking and looking at how systems tied together. And then the creative aspect is the software development because we're building new things and solving for challenges every day. So it was kind of a sweet spot. And then going to Drexel, I have an internship program and the ability to then go work out in the industry and try to apply these skills, really just, I think kind of sealed the deal for me.
Yeah. Well, it's the thing too about building systems for a very digital forward world these days, right? So I mean, it's a space that is going to continue to evolve. We hear a lot about it. It's impacting. I mean, obviously, right? You go from a Comcast to a Nationwide, very different industries, as far as the types of tools and applications you're able to build. Um, People hear these terms that the digital forward. Digital is a big part of the conversation today at Nationwide, and talking about data. I think there's a lot of, I don't want to call it apprehension, but maybe uneasiness because of what, the thing we're talking about today, right? Cybersecurity. And when you talk about these digital tools and, you think about the retailers out there that it almost feels like it's out of their grasp, right? Like the security around it or the ability to open themselves up to, you know, um, some bad actors out there that may be coming for data in some way. It's something that they haven't really, I don't want to say 100% bought into yet, but it's just that shaky ground right now. So how do what's sort of the approach there for you as far as whether it's explaining the space and helping them understand it, or just get a better grasp of kind of what they're doing around it.
Yeah, yeah, and it can be tough too because not only does it appear to be daunting, but looking for answers on the World Wide Web, can yield hundreds, if not thousands or billions, millions of results. And you find yourself trying to figure out, where do I begin? That this is, it's such a huge concept. It's not as straightforward as, saying, hey, I lock my door at the end of the day when I go home and I leave my business behind. So I think one of the biggest things, to start with when you're trying to generate some sort of buy-in or get someone on board with cybersecurity as a vision is to quantify it for them. Sit down with them, personalize a little bit of that messaging, understand how they do business, and say, you have a point of sale system. Here's how your point of sale system could be exposed. Just like you lock your door at the end of the day, like, are you locking your computer so that,
Hmm.
it's password protected when you walk away and someone else can't step, walk up to it and do something on that machine? Normally, the risks alone would be enough to motivate someone to want to buy in. But oftentimes, small, medium-sized businesses are running on a tight budget. And so it's not the first thing that comes to mind. Oftentimes we'll try to avoid it until, maybe it becomes a bigger problem and there's some sort of a serious issue.
Yeah.
That starts to be a little bit too late, in the game.
Right.
Uh, so, there's a bunch of different ways in which, you can kind of make this a little bit fun even. If you can sit down and quantify, the state of the business and look at things from end to end, it's almost like going to the doctor for a health check. He's going to tell you that you've got to, exercise and eat right and be healthy. If you can take that same sort of practicality and sit down with cybersecurity and say, I'm going to keep my software up to date. I'm going to update my passwords, and you can put together, what looks like, a health check or checklist. You can, make it easier, kind of demystify, some of that vagueness, the ambiguity, make it, very concrete and start to foster a mindset. And I think that
Yeah.
fostering the mindset and, creating this sort of tangible list of things to look at is the first step towards getting buy-in. Because now you've taken something from being this problem that was difficult to address into, a problem that's been quantified. And now I
Right.
can gauge that logical part of my brain. The fear center has been turned off. Now I can start thinking about how am I going to solve for these challenges?
Right. Well, what's unique too, right? I mentioned title VP of Technology and IT. Cybersecurity is just a part of that, right? Like it's just a segment of the your attention. Or am I? Is that an assumption on my end? How much is cybersecurity something you're aware of every day?
It is. It didn't used to be. And I
Yeah.
and I would say that the industry has changed a lot in the last 20 years. So when I first started working in IT, a lot of times, the focus was on putting antivirus on your computer, making sure
Yeah.
you were scanning everything for viruses, and then putting firewalls in place, so hackers couldn't get through on the network. Since then, there's been, I think, an evolution and a lot of learning in the industry,
Mm,
kind of the hard way, because that approach was very much a bolt-on after the fact. We treated
yeah.
security as just another feature. And in the last probably 5 to 7 years, the game has changed. So there are an increase in cyber attacks. There's an increase in volume of cyber attacks. There's much more payout for the black market for data. And the attacks have gotten more complicated, with solutions that are provided by AI. So we
Hmm.
do, AI and machine learning, and it's not just for the good guys. The bad guys use
Right.
it too. So I think the challenge now is that you have to think about security in every design. And overseeing both IT and development, I'm looking at security from what happens in our data centers to what happens in the cloud to what we're building in our applications to how we're moving data between
Right.
applications. And then ultimately looking at, folks on their desktop computer, like, you're on a company computer right now, there's people in the office on a company computer, the communications in between, the security of your machine. So it has to be a part of every facet because it's like medieval warfare. The
Yeah.
hackers are going to look for the chink in the armor. They're going to look for, like that one notch, that one area that's not protected, and they're going to use that as a way to get in. So it doesn't matter how they get in, as long as they have a door.
Right. Well, and what's crazy too, I know, you and I both have talked about some of the the events or education around the space. And of course the facts that are out there, they're myriad that we've covered on the independent thinking blog or through NLAs like your own at primetime that you've presented. Those chinks in the armor, more often than not, they're the humans behind the machines, right? Is kind of what we're learning, right? You don't want to admit it. You hate to have to admit it, but I mean, the systems are what they. Let's be real. Hackers, if they want to find a way to get around some sort of system or software, they more likely can or will. But it's the path of least resistance, right? And more often than not, it's those human error instances that result in a company's information, or from as small as an independent retailer up to some of the largest companies in the world that find themselves at fault.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. And that goes back to the buy-in point, right? Of getting like it's your focus, in your day to day around cybersecurity and making sure that the company's safe. But to the point of like getting that buy-in and making sure people are aware. You do some pretty cool things here at Nationwide that I think a retailer could learn from, in terms of how they get the staff on board. And you talked a little bit about it before, but I mean, something even as simple as just a town hall. I think as we're sitting here today, we're recording. I don't know if you plan to talk about cybersecurity at all today, or if you've got
Sure.
a minute yet. See, there you go. So let's talk about some of those things and just the mindset of from your seat, that recurring, just constantly bringing it up and having it be part of the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a key part of really fostering a mindset and a culture that is secure. It doesn't matter, how technically savvy your business is or how complex your solutions are. At the end of the day, you want to make sure that if you're working with something that's sensitive, like customer information or financial information or healthcare information, and that spans, multiple industries. The feedback I'm about to share, isn't specific to even what we're doing here, but it is, a good sort of set of, I guess, credo or principles to live by. Anytime that you're looking at something sensitive, make sure it's a part of the conversation. And anytime that you have an opportunity, especially when you're looking to shift that culture, you don't want to miss the opportunity to get the message out there. And so for me, this means that when we have our town hall meetings, like we're doing later today, I have 2 slides in there. It's not much, but it covers 2 very important points. One, it's going to be a reminder of something practical that we can do every day around phishing, since emails are the largest vector still, even today. Even though we have all these
Crazy.
fancy new technologies, email still remains the largest vector for getting things into the organization, good or bad.
Right.
And the second thing I'm going to share is actually, I think, a really important strategy for being able to drive adoption, which is celebrating the wins. Because we've taken something that's super complex and we have a very talented set of engineers and technologists who are working on solving for those problems. Oftentimes, when we look at IT or engineering, our focus is on trying to solve problems. And so we're constantly focused on the negative. It's a challenge to take a step back and look at the positive. And so that second slide today is going to focus on some of the wins that we've had here internally and to look at some of the quantifying metrics and KPIs behind where we have moved the needle. Because
Mhm.
that second piece, like after you've demystified that concept of cybersecurity, is
Right.
showing that you can, in fact, make a huge difference in the overall company stance. And that is something that's measurable. It's work that you can show. And when folks are able to see the metrics, they can get behind the story. They can get
Yeah.
behind the narrative. They can support you. They can help push those metrics, in the right direction.
Well, that's the.
So,
Oh,
yeah,
go ahead. So that's the point too. Kind of like back to the human error aspect. Humans may be one of the most common reasons why something a cyber event happens. On the other side of it, and it's one of the greatest things I ever heard in this space, and to the point of getting buy-in from an event from a partner of ours, Telesystem. I love first of all, I don't know if it's an IT thing in the IT space, but everyone making it like almost like comedy for the rest of the company. Like you got to make it funny, and that's how it becomes memorable. I mean, you do a great job of it when you present and things like that. But just they have an event called Hackers Suck, and it like hashtag Hackers Suck. Like it's incredible. It's funny and it's memorable and it works. And that's another just I guess side bit like tactic you can take. But one of the keynoters that they had was at one of the recent events talked about how you have to make it personal, right? So you got to when I'm sitting here, you mentioned it, right? In front of a company computer and not something that, and not to, this is not me telling the IT person here that I don't treat it this way, but like, and when you think about a company computer, most people don't think about it like their personal device, right? Like they think about it as, oh, it's the company's, like whatever, right? But when you make it personal and you make you kind of position the things that can happen, or like put yourself in the shoes of the company. Would you treat your information this way? Would you treat your technology this way? Would you treat your sensitive materials this way? No, would be the reasonable answer that you'd likely hear from an individual, right? But it's that human connection, I think, that everyone can get behind. And if there's anything anyone gets out of this today, is that I hope that you're able to, do that, and sort of go down that path of making cybersecurity something that resonates on a personal level with your employees, because I think that's your easiest path to buy in, for sure. But some awesome stuff there, and I know we got a little bit more to dive into. One thing I wanted to ask, because I mean, you've been in this space. You mentioned it, 2 decades plus. I'm sure you've seen some crazy things out there. Is there like anything memorable from a cybersecurity standpoint and this is like, let's be clear up front and let everyone know we're not going to put people, company, individuals, yourself even on blast. But is there anything that stands out when you think of just, I can't believe that happened?
I've got a handful of things that do stand out over the years. Not all of them are as crazy as you might think, but some of them will make you scratch your head a little bit.
Yeah.
So the first one that comes to mind, I had some very old 386 machines, back in the early 90s, still running, Windows, 95, to kind of date it. And we had software that was loaded on floppy disks and zip drives
Hmm.
and things of that nature. And what was interesting is, there were viruses that would pop up all the time, and the things were pretty early on, so folks were experimenting a bit. Not all the viruses were successful, but the antivirus would be run, on the shared computer at home, very frequently. And there's a virus that managed to escape detection for almost 10 years. And it wasn't until, about, the early to mid 2000s that an antivirus update, was pushed. It ran against a directory of just archived files that had been sitting on the computer we hadn't touched in a long time. And it flagged a virus that had never made it anywhere. It was a worm.
Wow.
It wasn't particularly well written. And so, just I guess the reason it sticks out in my mind is to say that sometimes there are viruses or things that are latent there, just like in the human body. If you get chicken pox, that virus is there with you
Sits there.
forever. And
Yeah.
see all the commercials on TV saying that when you're in your 50s or 60s, like you might get shingles. The virus is
Terry
ready.
Bradshaw, man, I can't get him out of my head.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, so like, that same thing happens with computers too. It's like there
Yeah.
may be things that are already there, and so keeping your software up to date, it goes a long way, to solving for things like that. Another one, and this is a personal anecdote, and there are folks, from my college days that will remember this. I used to make a game out of guessing passwords, and for a while I was pretty good at it. And things have changed a lot since then.
Yeah.
But I was able to guess the password of a friend of mine who left his computer unattended. And I
Oh.
got into the computer, and thankfully, being the nice guy that I am, I didn't do anything nefarious. But I did change his password. I reversed all the characters and made it the same password but backwards. And we got a good laugh out of it, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of frustration that came with that too.
Well,
So,
it's like how
you
it
know,
just goes to show how easy it can be, right? Like you don't know. And
yeah,
luckily you're like the white knight, right? Out there doing things like Robin Hood of cybersecurity over here. Um,
yeah, yeah, and that's you know part of it's to teach a lesson, which is like
yeah.
don't use a really easy to guess password. And because there are folks like me out there that will do this, but there's different levels of hackers. You've got your white hat hackers that are doing it, from like an ethical perspective. You have your black hat hackers, which are trying to break things, and you got your gray hat hackers that are in between. And like morality may be, a question. Uh,
Hmm.
so simple things that you could do, but I'd say the more interesting use cases happen at a very large scale. And I have a lot of friends that work in the industry. I have a lot of interesting conversations, over dinner, behind closed doors, under a veil of confidence. So without putting out names or specifics, there have been cases where, especially with cloud infrastructure and a lot of
Yeah.
moving parts, where companies that I've worked with would attempt to build a platform very quickly, and in order to move fast, use off-the-shelf software from different vendors. And the off-the-shelf software, all those independent moving parts, were secure in their own right. And so imagine if you were trying to build a car really fast, like,
Right.
go online, order an engine, order some wheels, put a couple doors on it, put a steering wheel in and a dashboard. So all those pieces could be manufactured by someone that you trust. But then when you go to actually put them together, is there a gap in the chassis? Is there a
Hmm.
gap in the connection? And there were a couple cases that I've seen where on live production systems that were handling, very large amounts of sensitive information, there were cloud-based hackers that were able to get in between those gaps in the systems, elevate their privileges, and then start exploring. And
Wow.
thankfully, we had other tools in place that were able to very quickly detect the fact that there was an intrusion, see that the pattern of behavior didn't match what it was supposed to for that user, and then be able to lock it down and change the credentials very quickly. But had we not jumped on that very quickly, there would have been potential for a data breach, because those systems, when you have those privileges, they could start reaching out into a database. They could
Right.
run a report. They could go and change someone's details.
It's
And
crazy.
it's amazing how often that happens. And this is a more general observation of just how crazy cybersecurity can be sometimes. You can set up a server on the internet, and within minutes, you would likely be under attack
Hmm.
because there are, millions and millions of bots and networks and different bad actor groups all attempting to, scan the internet for vulnerabilities. So don't put your servers online, don't put your platforms online without some sort of protection in place, because it doesn't take very long. In
Right.
fact, there are tests out there, and there's actually another convention called DEF CON, which is, very
Yeah.
hacker centric. It's usually in Vegas. I'd recommend you leave, any personal devices and your hotel safe before you go in, because you'll walk through the door and within minutes, anything you're carrying on you could potentially be scanned, wiped, hacked. It's fast, and it's a badge of pride for those folks because that's what they do in the industry for a living.
Yeah.
Same thing happens on the World Wide Web. And so, I mean, that part to me is just crazy that I could stand up a server and host a website and be getting tens of thousands of attacks every day. And so for me, especially here at NMG, where I'm overseeing multiple e-commerce platforms, including one shop.
Hmm.
That's something that we have to take very seriously, because when that
Yeah.
site goes online, it has to be secure from the moment that it goes live.
The worst thing you can do is let your guard down. And I mean, to all the examples and points you make right there, it's crazy. Long gone are the days like, I think back to Oregon Trail days and, the what computer systems were like, and even to early internet eras. And your prince from the Middle East reaching out trying to store his 300 million rupees in your account. Just needs your social security number if you don't mind. Like those still happen. Don't get me wrong, and they're hilarious when they do. But it's like it's the laughable ones that it's like, haha, nice try. But like they've gotten better. You mentioned AI, like the improvements of all the different types of phishing that are out there, and um, the spear phishing and whatever, like these very personalized and individualized attacks that come through email, text, phone call. Like they're all we had I not to put her on blast, but the wife, we had a phone call come through to her with the like someone pretending to be our bank, and saying that they noticed some like really weird charges. They had our address and like got to a point where they were trying to send us to a website to fill out information and file a report. It was complete. I was like, hang up now. Luckily, this was like 2 weeks after I was at this hackers event, so I like knew what to look. I was like, that's not real. Like they don't ask for that. The banks don't do this. So like they get legit, and they look incredibly real and hard to tell the difference. And it's just keeping yourself alert, right? And looking out for just those minor inconsistencies. It could be just like one letter misspelled in an email to tell the difference between what's a legit email from your company CEO or not. And I know, there were some examples shared again, just to not to over reference that event, but like some video capabilities where people are using deep fake AI to do video calls that, the only way you can really tell is if you get that person or that image to stay on the screen longer than a few seconds because they only have so long that they're able to, truthfully look like a real video before they start looping or something like that. But like it's incredible the detail and just complexity of some of these attacks today. And I mean, it's all just about being alert and aware and second guessing, and not assuming that everything's right and real and whatnot out there. But again, just to long story short, don't let the guard down.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that example of your wife, getting, fished for bank details is something that happens to corporations too.
Oh,
So, simple thing that you could do is make sure you've got a callback procedure in place. So you get the call in,
hmm
somebody's asking for bank details, and whatever bank you've worked with, small businesses establish something that says, hey, like I'll call
yeah.
back. I've got this special code, and we'll know how to handle the wire transfer information securely. Yeah.
I think of the just recently, I think I shared my own experience on Teams, that we have where I had someone text me claiming to be our CEO and asking for something by my full name. And I was like, come on, it was one of those obvious examples of wasn't real, but like, that's what they're doing. Like just these bad actors out there texting you, looking for information, trying to set up a phone call or just get something out of you. It's crazy and it's nonstop. But it also, again, to our point at the top, we're talking in November. We're publishing this in November, and it's a conversation that can't stick to just the 31 days of October. Cybersecurity is certainly a year-round conversation, and appreciate you taking the time to jump into it with us, man, because this was cool. And one that I know, you'll have NLAs in the future, I'm sure, and we'll have opportunities to continue to connect on this. And I look forward to every town hall and whatever you're bringing to the table, because it's always fun, and keeps it top of mind for us. And I hope top of mind for our members as well as they listen to this. So, Mr. Aller, it was a lot of fun, man.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, thanks for having me, Rob.
Awesome. And thank you again to Bryan for taking that time and sharing, his unique perspective, some interesting stories. Of course, the Robin, I'm going to not let him live that down. The Robin Hood of cybersecurity here at Nationwide Marketing Group. But no, just a topic, like I said at the top, it needs to be discussed throughout the year and has to be something that you're thinking about every day, that your employees are thinking about every day, and that they're bought into. Because if they're not, and something happens, it's just you gotta protect your company and your data and the sensitive information that you have access to. And one way to do that is just by creating that buy-in and getting people to care about it and not let their guard down. So appreciate Bryan, making it a topic that is of concern and of interest as well to people here at Nationwide and within the network, and sharing that story with us. So appreciate him, and as always, appreciate you listening to the Independent Thinking Podcast, and we'll catch you next time.